Welcome back to the class, everyone. So you decided you would treat yourself to May the 4th with the General Skywalker Lightspeed bundle. And as we've already covered very well, that's awesome because it has really good value, partially the fact that you get the full-fledged negotiator fleet going. But it does leave a little bit of a question. Once you're done unlocking all the characters, including General Skywalker himself, what are you supposed to do with all these, what seem to be random characters? So that really is the point of today's video. We want to walk through what you're supposed to do after you get the General Skywalker Lightspeed bundle. We are going to cover what characters you want in addition to the ones that you're given in the screenshot seen below here. In addition to that, what teams are they actually supposed to be formed into the easiest way possible. And then finally, we will cover what order you should probably put the Zetas on, as I know that tends to be one of the larger points of contention when going after this pack, because while you do get all of the characters pretty much instantaneously, you don't really have any Zetas, and even if you only have 3 or 4 saved up, you have to choose which is the overall best value to go with. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this. First thing I want to cover is what other characters you need to go after you get the pack and General Skywalker himself. And it is pretty simple. In addition to that, it's even kind of easy, because what you want is you want to finish the 501st squad for General Skywalker. Luckily, you already get 5s because he's kind of a part of the negotiator fleet, so you'll get him at R3 from the pack, as you can see here below. But in addition to that, you are going to want to work on Rex, Echo, and Archer, because they make up the rest of the 501st team. There really aren't that many good substitutes for that. You can shift in the OG Ahsoka into the squad. It is a little bit worse, but more importantly, we're going to want Ahsoka in other squads, so you really want to be working on these clones. What the really big bright side to them is they are really accessible. Well, I guess not at this very second, but they do pop up in a lot of the shipment stores, which is kind of the cheaper and faster way to get characters, whereas some of the characters you will have to farm off of a hard node. But right now, ARC Trooper is already accelerated, plus on a 12 Cantina node, making him a pretty easy character to get. In addition to that, General Grievous, who really needs to be bought with the fleet currency, which again, not currently available. But once you do that, you will have them completely built up, and you will be able to make 3 full-fledged teams with everything you've got from the bundle in addition to this. General Grievous is obviously here because you're going to get 4 droids with the pack, but unfortunately, while Asajj Ventress is required for the mission, she's really not that good of a droid leader, like at all, because her leadership doesn't have anything to do with droids, even in the slightest. She's really there for lore purposes. So that being said, once you get those 4 other characters in addition to everything that comes, you will be able to build 3 really good teams based off of that one pack alone. The General Skywalker 501st squad, which we've already kind of talked about how this works. Again, there aren't really that many substitutes, the only one really existing being Ahsoka, and at the same time, we want Ahsoka to be used in other squads, so that's pretty self-explanatory here. I would recommend using General Skywalker over Shaak Ti, even if he is stuck at gear 11, because you didn't have the necessary get to get him up right away, just because he offers more versatility, and Shaak, quite frankly, is a really good Jedi that can be used in other squads, both as a cleanse or as an offense up tool, or just a really fast Jedi for Jedi Knight Luke. So that's the squad we're going to want to be building. The Padme squad, while you are eventually going to branch out with this after we get into better teams like JMK and Kelleron Beck, this team will ultimately split. But in the meantime, if you don't really have anything else to work with, this is a very solid squad. The OG Padme squad is going to consist of these 4 on the left side of the screen, pretty much excluding Shaak Ti. But Shaak Ti really isn't bad in the team. While you can swap her out for characters like R2 or Barriss or even Mace, Shaak Ti does just fine, and if you're already getting her at Relic 3 and you don't have anywhere else to put her, you might as well throw her into the team. One of the nice additions to that, and we'll get to this later when we talk about the Zetas, you really don't need to apply her Zetas at all to be able to use her in a Padme team, because they are completely revolving around clones, and as you can see, despite the Clone Wars armor on General Kenobi, there aren't actually any clones in this team. So overall, great team for Conquest, especially because we don't have any of the other TW or GSC Omicrons to boost up the other teams there, but also still fairly good in GSC and TW if you do not have access to the premium characters like a Qui-Gon Jinn Omicron or Kelleron Beck himself. And then finally, we have a Grievous Droids. This team, for whatever reason, typically is not used outside of TW. The main reason for it being used in TW is the fact that Droideka himself has a very good TW Omicron, but it's still a solid team if you are in the lower divisions of GAC, somewhere around Carbonite or Chromium. But at the end of the day, you can make this even better, and while a lot of people aren't going to want to do this because they just got an R3 Droideka for free, there are other options you can throw in here that you might have available. BB-8, for example, will give the whole team 40% turn meter right off the bat, which makes some counters trying to beat it when it's on defense a little bit more difficult. It won't stop Wampa because he kind of just doesn't care, and he has ways to avoid the tenacity down, but it does make things pretty difficult for Bad Batch. Another option that you can throw in there is going to be Newt himself, which is more of an offensive tool just because he gets to control the field and do double damage due to dealing damage via debuffs. So you do have some options there, but ultimately the vanilla General Grievous team is not that bad, and especially if you're wanting to do things in TW, it is probably going to be the best option with, you know, ignoring the fact that Stop has a Datacron right now because it's probably not relevant for most people out there. So that really does cover the first two parts of the video. These are the characters you need after you have already gotten the pack, and then these are the three main teams that you're going to be able to form by doing that. Now, last but not least is going to be the Zeta Priority Order. And we want to talk about General Skywalker first. Number one, because he is very important. But in addition to that, a lot of you out there have already applied a ton of Zetas to these other characters because you probably needed them to complete the event in the first place. So I do still want to cover them and where they're important, but I realize for the majority of people, it's just not going to be all that helpful because they've kind of already crossed that bridge. So with General Skywalker, this is pretty simple. Long story short, he wants and needs every single Zeta he has. And I know it's kind of hard to hear, but I do want to talk about the nuances of which ones we want to start with. And it's pretty simple. We just want the bottom one here on the far left corner, and we're just going to work our way up. That's pretty much as simple as it gets. None of them are bad. I'm not trying to trash any of them, but some of them are higher priority than others. The very bottom one is going to give him the 100% counter chance and 50% critical chance if all allies are 501st at the start of the battle. This is one of the things that makes General Skywalker so annoying, is he will have a forced taunt throughout the battle as long as he has protection. And when he does, when he's constantly hitting you back, especially when his damage increases, it's just going to be very, very messy for the enemy team. And ultimately, you allow some teams to get in there and do things that they otherwise shouldn't if he is not countering the entire time. In addition to that, this is a little bit more niche, but also still very good, particularly against Sith Empire, and even more specifically, Malak and Malgus. If the target enemy has no protection from General Skywalker using an ability, reduce their current max health by 20% for the rest of the battle. For those of you who don't know, the whole reason why General Skywalker came out way back in the day was to replace the Sith Empire meta with Malak. So this was specifically designed with Malak in mind, because Malak starts with no protection, meaning the gas can pretty much shrink his overall max health immediately. And even outside of that matchup, this is nice to have, as it does pretty much prevent all timeouts unless you're going up against something really large, like a Galactic Legend that will just be immune to this in general. Next up is going to be his leadership ability. Very good, a little bit situational, just because Gas has the capability to just knock some teams out even without this, due to not only his own damage with his armor shred, but in addition to having Rex deal a lot of max health damage. But ultimately, there are some of the bigger, more challenging fights out there where 2% offense, whenever the enemy gains a buff, is a pretty big deal, especially because it's hard to find a team out there right now that doesn't have any buffs. Again, this is not in any way trying to bash the leadership. These are all important. These are all good. That's just the order that I would do them in, considering what the teams you will be able to beat with just these three. Now, last and I guess least is going to be the basic. I do still like this, and there was a time when the basic really was not all that important from a Zeta perspective, but I would say that you do still want it now. And the reason why is you have a guaranteed critical hit against a character who has armor shred when you come in with the telekinesis hit. And the reason why that's important is because the counter that we just previously talked about, being Sith Empire, when you are going against them in GAC when they have their Omicrons, they have a ton of crit avoidance, meaning even General Skywalker, with his incredible critical chance, in addition to his critical chance that he already starts with on his base, it's going to be really hard to crit the enemy Malgus team. But if you have a guarantee for it to happen because he's already armor shredded, because you use that on your special, you're going to be a lot better off, especially when you consider the fact that this isn't just important to crit. we don't really care as much about the damage. We care more about the fact that when we crit, we are going to be increasing Malgus's cooldowns, which will help him, or rather hinder him from getting to his big hit more consistently, and will help Gas win in most circumstances, but also in the 1v1 scenario where you really do not want Malgus to get that one big hit off. Now that we've covered General Skywalker as probably the top priority out of everything, I do want to take a deeper dive into the rest of the Zetas of the team, kind of explaining where most of them land. Padme is pretty obvious. She has a leadership, and it is a good one, so you have to have it on for her team to function and do what it needs to do. Unique, very close after that. It's really not that much worse than leadership. You just typically want the leadership first. They both do very important things for the squad. General Grievous, Unique is going to be the most important for him. I realize that seems weird. It's actually very contrary to what we just mentioned with Padme, but the fact that he gets a free bonus turn every single time one of his guys goes down is a big deal, because it allows him to, even with a weaker droid squad, to just take things out, because he will get kills off of this because his max health will keep stacking. Leadership is still important because that's all their turn meter mechanics, but not as important as, you know, just blowing everyone up with Metaloid Monstrosity, which is a very fitting name. B1, also very high priority. Having 50 stacks versus 100 is a very big deal considering the amount they do. It not only adds offense, but also tenacity and critical avoidance to the team. Ahsoka's, I mean, if she's not assisting every single turn, then why is this being good just doesn't matter. So, in addition to that, we have 5's Tactical Awareness, which we consistently refer to this as 5 Sacrifice, because he is able to pass all the stats to the rest of his Clone Trooper 501st ally teams. So these are going to be the very highest priority. We're going to label them as crucial. You really don't have the Padme or the General Grievous or even the 501st faction fully functioning until you have these Zetas. They are of the utmost important. I realize there are a lot of them, and that kind of makes things difficult, but it's just kind of where we stand. Maybe pick one team at a time and finish them off, like do the Padme team first, or maybe do the General Skywalker team first, and then move on to the Separatists. But you want to be moving down from this level to this level to this level, ideally assuming you have none of these applied. Next up are going to be B2 and Kenobi. These are both important. I would not consider these luxury at all, but at the same time, you want to have the other ones first. B2 is going to be able to give turn meter to the rest of his team, which once you get into the General Grievous team and you realize how many different turn meter mechanics they have, you're going to realize that is actually very important. Again, not as important as B1 having twice the amount of stacks as he does at the very beginning, but still are going to want it. Sarusu or General Kenobi's unique Zeta here. This one is really important for Galactic Republic because he will not taunt that much because they will be immune to crits, and that will let him taunt more. Again, the Padme team can still kind of function without it, but at the same time, you want your taunting tank to taunt as much as possible. So it's not, definitely does not fall into the luxury category. You do need it. And up next is going to be the luxury category, and we need to explain the nuances of this quite a bit. So General Anakin, his unique Zeta, it basically is going to give Padme Amidala a bonus turn whenever General Anakin takes his bonus turn. And while that's cool, long term, you're probably not even going to use General Anakin with the Padme squad, so it's pretty short-lived. In addition to that, sometimes that's just not even needed in the fight. Like, he can get his bonus turn, maybe he'll wipe out the entire team, or maybe he doesn't, but Padme will eventually get her team. It doesn't really change that many counters. It was really custom built, again, for the Sith Empire team, which is really just isn't a relevant counter anymore with what Padme is doing, really with what Sith Empire is doing. Droideka, this one is really important, obviously, if you want the TW Omicron, and it was somewhat important for the event, depending on how you did it. But realistically, Droideka outside of TW is just not going to be used that much, so maybe it is a Zeta you can skip. Next up is going to be Shaak Ti. We've already explained this pretty in depth. If you don't have clone troopers on the team, there's really no point in using these. I did get a comment recently when we were talking about these Zetas, and someone mentioned the fact that you would still need them if you were going to do the cam mission. I think the reality is for most mid-game guilds now, though, is they've pushed rote as soon as possible, and then they've just been using Get 3 to buy cam. That's just kind of the route people are going. If your guild is in the weird situation of wanting to focus on the cam mission and not go all the way to rote, then you will need both of these, assuming you're not doing something weird with like Bad Batch Omicrons. Next up is going to be Rex. I actually don't like Rex's Zeta almost at all. It's not bad, but it's definitely falling into the luxury category, simply because other 501st Clone Trooper allies reduce their own abilities by 1 at the start of each of their turn. Sounds good, but at the same time, when you start to look at the other 501st Clone Allies specials, they're really not that well used. If you look at Arcs, he typically will throw his out so that you can immediately get the turret onto another character. And then he wants to use his basic because he's actually getting more damage from Echo assisting, so his cooldowns don't matter that much. 5s, you don't even really want him to taunt, so you're not going to be using his special back-to-back unless Gas is pretty much standing the entire battle. And then Echoes actually you do want. You do want to be able to use this as much as possible. Like 4 cooldowns going to 3, that does change battles. Not only can it stun all droids and dispel buffs, but at the same time, this move actually deals more damage than his basic. So even if you only have a single ally left standing, you're going to want the EMP grenade as much as possible. So that is kind of why the Rex Zeta is in the luxury category rather than just completely useless. Next up is going to be our good friend Echo. Again, this is not necessary for the 501st Squad to do everything that it wants to do. It is nice where whenever they miss, they deal 20% of their max health, which again, I mean, you're not necessarily opening or closing counters by having that. But at the same time, I mean, I would like to do 20% more max health damage. Like, that sounds good. Even if it only happens once a battle or once every couple of battles, that's not going to hurt. And last and certainly least is going to be our good friend Magna, whose Zeta sucks. This is one of the worst Zetas in the entire game. I've already ragged on this plenty, so we don't really need to go in depth, but if no buffs were dispelled, reset the cooldown of this ability, which there's always going to be buffs, so that's never even going to happen. And even if there weren't, like, you don't mod Magna for potency so that the stun lands. And even then, like, Magna's not there to stun, he's there to cleanse. Like, why would you even use that ability? Like, I guess you would use it so that B1 assists, like, that's a good reason, I guess. But for the most part, you want to be using the Dispel or the Target Lock from the basic, or this one that cleanses the whole team and then gives Junker speed up. Is actually pretty good too. But yeah, this is, don't do this. Like, I have a very large account. I have a ton of Zetas applied. I still have not applied this just because I would rather have them in the bank for some random marquee character coming up that I'll farmed in 3 months than apply it to Magna Guard. Maybe I'll do it one day, but that day is not today. So that is going to be it for this video. We wanted to cover what characters you need to make sure you finish after you do the pack, what teams you're going to form with said characters, and then how to apply Zetas onto all of those. If you're wondering where Arc would fall, he actually does kind of fall into the Rex and Echo area. I do like his a little bit more than theirs, but it's not as crucial as all the ones above it. So thank you guys for watching, and as always, stay awesome.